Okay. Mm. So today I will speak about polysaccharide. So I'm a chemist. So I will show many molecules and especially sugars. So I will first explain what is a sugar, a monosaccharide, because it is important to understand what it is to understand the physicochemical properties of polysaccharides. And so I will show a few famous polysaccharides and explain some properties of some of them, especially in terms of gelation properties. And then I will finish with description of chemical modification of polysaccharide to prepare hydrogel to mimic more or less gelation properties of some polysaccharide, but for biomedical application, which is part of my research area. So this first part will be a retold a description. If you cannot understand, you can stop me, and I will re-explain. So polysaccharides are polymers, which are made of repeating units, which consist of sugar, and they are abundant in nature, renewable, non-toxic, and relatively cheap. And generally, they exhibit original properties, which is due to the fact that the sugar is a repeating unit of a polymer. They are generally biocompatible and biodegradable. And some of them have specific biological properties, and I will explain you. So this polysaccharide can be isolated from different things, from plants, algae, and also animals. Here you have hyaluronic acid, which is at high concentration in the Rustenkorb, and chitosan, which is extracted from crustaceous shells. And also, in the last years, in the last 20 years, it is also possible to synthesize some polysaccharide by bacterial fermentation, which is quite interesting because it can allow to produce polysaccharide in large scale and with a high degree of purity. And this is the case of hyaluronic acid, and which explains the big development of this polysaccharide in the last 20 years, especially for biomedical application. So what can we say about these polysaccharides? So they are obtained by the linkage of monosaccharide through glycosylidic bond, and I will explain what is a glycosylidic bond. And compared to polypeptide, polysaccharides are made of sugar, and there are a wide variety of sugar, as you will see, which means that we have a very wide range of polysaccharides, very diverse chemical structure. And first, there is a lot of different type of structure of sugar, and also there is many ways to link to sugar, which means that we have a huge possibility to fabricate a polysaccharide, contrary to polypeptide and polynucleotides. So we know many polysaccharides, but in nature we have a lot of polysaccharides of which the structure is not elucidated because it takes a long time. So this polysaccharide can have important biological properties because sugar plays a role of information molecule, and generally polysaccharides are present on the surface of cells, and they participate to communication between cells. And so they are used to fabricate vaccines, and they play also role of structural supports of cell wall of plants, and also for the extracellular matrix of tissue. And they can also have another role, which is as a nutriment, and this is the case, for example, of starch in plant and glycogen in animals. So like for those who work on polymer, so we have homopolymer or copolymer or terpolymer. So this is also the case in polysaccharide. We can have homopolysaccharide or heteropolysaccharide, but well, in the case of homopolymer also we can have different structure, and in the case of hyaluronic acid, in the case of polysaccharide, when you have a homopolymer, you can have different polysaccharide because, as I said, you can link sugar with different ways. So what is a monosaccharide? So as I showed in the second slide, this slide, in fact, this is structure of hyaluronic acid in the solid state, so in the absence of solvent. And you can see that it adopts an helical structure. And there is a certain stiffness in the polymer chains, which is due to the sugar and the method of linkage. So you can see that the sugar have a cyclic structure. It can be a 6-member ring or a 5-member ring. So this one sugar is quite complicated to draw. And in fact, there are different methods to represent a sugar. So the easiest method is to represent a sugar in a 2-dimension, which is called the Fischer projection. And in this case, you can see a linear structure. And the sugar is made of carbon, oxygen, hydrogen. And you can see that there are a lot of hydroxyl groups, which explains the reason why generally you have many hydrogen bonds between polysaccharide. And so this is the first representation. And generally, sugar are called aldose or ketose. So aldose means that there is an aldehyde group. Ketose means that we have a ketone group. So there is a convention to represent sugar in 2 dimensions. First, regarding the number of carbon, number 1 is related to the carbonyl group. And what we can see, so it is on the top. And this, the orientation of this hydroxyl group is very important because when it is on the right, we say that we have a D-monosaccharide. And another point is that you can see that this is the representation in 1 dimension. In the space, in 3 dimensions, you have this representation. And you can see that most of the carbon are chiral. So there is an asymmetric center, which is due to the fact that the 4 substituents are different in the space, which means that if the position of this group is changed, we have a different monosaccharide. So this is very important because each monosaccharide are its own chemical or physical chemical property or biological properties. So, of course, normally, if you describe the sugar, you should describe the stereochemistry of each carbon, and it should be very complicated. So to simplify this, the convention is to say that this OH, which is at the carbon 5, if it is on the right, we say that it is a D monosaccharide, and if, on contrary, this OH is on the left, we say that it is a L monosaccharide. So in nature, we have, so the D sugar predominate. So to pass from the 2-dimension to a 3-dimension, so you need to see in space. This is not really my case. You need to turn some bond to respect the angle of carbon-carbon bond, and you obtain here the structure of the glucose in 3 dimensions when it is linear. But as I said, Generally, if you put a sugar in water, it is not in this linear structure, it adopts a cycle structure. And so why it adopts a cycle structure, I will explain a little later. And then, as I said, in the case of D-glucose, we have 4 chiral centers, which means that, in fact, as soon as we change only one stereochemistry of one carbon, we change the type of sugar, which means that glucose, since it has 4 chiral centers, it has 16 stereoisomers. And so there is a complicated terminology in the case of sugar. We speak about enantiomer when the molecules are in the mirror of each other. And in this case, enantiomer has the same physicochemical properties, but not the same biological properties. And this is quite problematic because it means that it's difficult to separate these 2 molecules, but it is important to make the difference since there are different biological properties. So stereoisomers are sugar when they differ at 1 or more chiral centers, and in this case, there are different physicochemical properties. And epimers differ only by 1 chiral center. So now you will be able to understand the difference between, for example, D-glucose and D-mannose, because in this case, D-mannose is the epimer of D-glucose because in carbon 1, the stereochemistry is different. So here you have a few structure of monosaccharide, which are found in nature, and those in yellow are important sugar which can be found in polysaccharide. So, and these sugar play a very important role in as signaling molecules. So, in communication, especially because they can interact with some protein at the surface of cells with the mechanism of lock-on-K. And they also play a role in cellular metabolism. So then, as I said, sugar adopt a cyclic structure. And so how to pass from a linear structure to a cyclic? In fact, this is because this hydroxyl group in position 5 will attack the carbonyl group by a nucleophilic addition reaction to form a cycle. So if we turn this molecule with a 90-degree angle, and then this OH attack this carbonyl, we obtain a cyclic structure. And this cyclic structure is called the Haworth representation. And in the Haworth representation, the convention is that the OH group and all the groups which are on the right will be at the bottom, and the group which will be on the left should be on the top. And what it is important is that when you form such a cycle, you will create a new chiral center at this carbon. And this carbon has a special name. This is the anomeric carbon. And in fact, when you form this cycle, there is 2 possibilities. Either the hydroxyl group is below the cycle, or the hydroxyl group can be above the cycle, which means that as soon as you are cyclization, you will have two different type of sugar because the configuration of this carbon will be different. And so this is the case is so. this carbon 1, when the OH is below the cycle, has the configuration alpha. And when the OH is above the cycle, it has the configuration beta. And for example, in the case of deglucose, when you put deglucose in water, it will form a cycle, alpha, but also beta, in a 6-member ring. And so the 6-member ring is called a pyranose. So if you say we have a sugar with pyranose, you should know that it is a 6-member ring. But it is also possible for glucose to cycle into a 5-member ring. And in this case, you will have, you will say that glucose has a furanose structure. And secondly, this carbon here is called an hemiacetal. If you have a ketose, as I said, because in nature we have aldose when we have aldehyde, but we can have also ketose, where in this case you have a ketone. And in this case, you will have a furanose, and this is the case of fructose, and you will have fructofuranose. So in the case of glucose, when we put glucose in water, it will form alpha D and beta D glucose in majority. You will have 1/3 of alpha D glucose, 2/3 of beta D glucose, and a few % of the linear molecule. And these sugars are in equilibrium put together, and this is called mutarotation of sugar. So, but this is the second representation of sugar, but it is not perfect. Why? Because a carbon has a tetrahedric structure. So it does not totally reflect the real structure of a sugar. And the real, and in fact, the real structure of a sugar will adopt different conformation, and theoretically it could adopt chair conformation or a boat conformation, but because of steric and electronic consideration, most of sugar adopt the chair configuration with the carbon in 4 position on the top of the average plane of the cycle, and the carbon in 1, the anomeric carbon, below the average plane of the sugar molecule. And because if you remember, carbon 1 is the carbon of the hemiacetal group. It is the anomeric carbon. This is the convention. And then this is carbon 2, 3, and 4. And this is a strict way to numbering carbon of a sugar. And this is very important because, as you will see later, when we have a polysaccharide, the linkage is very important because it will dictate the conformation of a polysaccharide. So this is so the real and the better way to represent alpha D glucopyranose. So now you understand why we say pyranose. This is because this is a 6-member ring, and alpha because this is the configuration of the carbon in 1, and D because if you remember, this is the initial stereochemistry of the molecule in the linear structure. So in nature, we have many monosaccharides, and this is a monosaccharide which can be found mainly in polysaccharide. So, as I said, D-mannose is an epimere of D-glucose, And you can see that the three sugar looks like similar, but there is one carbon which has a different configuration. Between galactose, it is in carbon 4, and between mannose, it is in carbon 2. And if we replace the primary hydroxyl group by a carboxylic acid group, we will have sugar, which are called uronic acid. And so this can be simply, instead of saying glucose, we say glucuronic acid, galacturonic acid, and mannuronic acid. And there are also sugar in which the hydroxyl in position 2 is replaced by an amine. And in this case, we will say glucosamine. And sometimes the glucosamine is N-acetylated. And in this case, we will say N-acetylglucosamine. So in nature, we have mainly neutral polysaccharide and also anionic polysaccharide. And we have only one polysaccharide which possesses glucosamine. This is chitosan, but chitosan is only produced in mushrooms. And it can also be produced from chitin after N-deacetylation, because chitin is an homopolymer of N-acetylglucosamine. So then what happens in the case of polysaccharide and in the case of a disaccharide? So in fact, to create a polysaccharide, you need to link two sugars by what we say a glycosidic bond. And when we do that, so the simple reaction which was described a long time ago when sugar chemistry was developed was, for example, if you react methanol with the sugar in acidic condition, you will form two glycosides, methyl beta-D glucoside, glucopyranoside, and methyl alpha-D glucopyranoside. And in fact, you cannot control this when you put the sugar in methanol with acid. You will have the two glycosides. And you will understand why it's very difficult in sugar chemistry to synthesize disaccharide, oligosaccharide, because of this, you need to separate the two molecules, which is long and laborious. And so in the last, I would say 60 years, sugar chemists develop method to synthesize glycoside while controlling the stereochemistry of sugar. And for this, it is necessary to protect the hydroxyl group and to introduce a specific functional group at the carbon 1 to activate this carbon and to control stereochemistry at this position. And generally, even we do that, we don't have 100% of one sugar. Generally, it is 98%, and which means that it's difficult. 2 weeks ago, I was at the conference on sugar chemistry, and now what is the story is that there is now a robot which are sold, which allow to produce oligosaccharide, which means that each step the robot will do protection of sugar, activation of sugar, linkage, and step by step to produce oligosaccharide. And they try to use artificial intelligence to predict stereochemistry and the purity of sugar to perfectly control. But it means that at the end, they have a few milligrams, 1 or 2 milligrams of oligosaccharide, because it requires a lot of reactant and reaction step. So in nature, enzymes are able to produce polysaccharide while perfectly controlling the stereochemistry of the glycosidic bond. So here you can see that if you link deglucopyranose together to form a disaccharide, you can have cellobiose or you can have maltose. The only difference is the configuration of this carbon, which is beta in this case, alpha in this case. When I put these things, it means that we have a mixture of alpha and beta. And so these two disaccharides, so cellobiose is a degradation product of cellulose, and maltose is a degradation product of starch, which means that the only difference between cellulose and starch is the configuration of this carbon. So you will understand that in this case, as soon as you change the structure of the glycosidic bond, you will have another polysaccharide with different conformation, because this bond dictates the overall conformation of the polysaccharide, in addition to substituents on the sugar. So as I said, now we move to polysaccharide. We can have homopolysaccharides, which can be linear or branched. And here you have the glycosidic bond, which will have an important role on the overall conformation of the polysaccharide. And you can have heteropolysaccharide, and generally in nature, heteropolysaccharides are made of 2 different sugars or 3 different sugars, sometimes more, but these are typically the main polysaccharide found in nature. And of course, I presented some sugar, but you should take into account that sometimes there are substituents on the sugar, pyruvate, sulfate group, which play also an important role in nature. So then we have, so if we have a polysaccharide from neutral sugar, it will be rich in a hydroxyl group, which will be responsible of the formation of network of intra and inter-hydrogen bonds. And this is the case of cellulose and amylose found in starch. And generally, these polysaccharides have a poor or a low solubility in water. And you have ionic polysaccharides, which are made of uronic acid, which can contain sulfate group. And in this case, these polysaccharides belong to the family of polyelectrolytes. And these are natural polyelectrolytes. And these polysaccharides are characterized by their charge density, which will strongly affect their conformation in solution. And this is the case of pectins, alginate, carrageenan, chitosanes, and also hyaluronic acid. And generally, they are readily soluble in water, but they undergo important electrostatic effect on short and long distances, which is well known in the case of polyelectrolyte. And I will explain a little about this. You can represent a natural polyelectrolyte like this. And this is the length of a polyelectrolyte H, and this is and along this chain, you will have a certain number of ionic group, and the distance between these two ionic group is very important because it will dictate electrostatic interaction between polymer chain and also inside polymer chain. Which means that depending on the structure of the polysaccharide, you will have strong effects. And in polyelectrolyte science, we use the charge parameter lambda to describe a polyelectrolyte, because this charge parameter will influence strongly the distribution of counter-ion along the polyelectrolyte. And especially if the polyelectrolyte is highly charged, it will attract a certain amount of counter-ion along the polyelectrolyte. And if you determine the activity of counter-ion along the polyelectrolyte, you will discover that you can only detect, I would say, a certain amount of counter-ion. And this is important because it means that if you have a change of conformation for a coil to an helix, the distance between the two charges will change. And so it means that it will affect the distribution of counter-ion along the polyelectrolyte. And if you determine the activity coefficient of this counter-ion, you can correlate the change of conformation with the activity coefficient. So I will give an example in the case of carrageenan. And so, which means that the study of electrostatic properties of polysaccharide can help to determine the conformation of polysaccharide. And the conformation is strongly dependent on the pH, the ionic concentration, and the temperature. And we will show an example with carrageenan. And as I said, the conformation of polysaccharide can be characterized by different methods, but also through the determination of the activity coefficient. And there were some polyelectrolyte theories which correlated the activity coefficient of counter-ion with the charge parameter. And I will show that with an example that this relationship were very useful to explain the change of conformation of carrageenan. So if I come back to neutral polysaccharide, I will just speak about starch and cellulose. Because as I said, these two polysaccharides only differ by the structure of the glycosidic bond. So starch is found in plants, in cereals, and also tubers like potatoes. And starch is a mixture of amylose and amylopectine. So this is a representation. So amylopectine is a highly branched, has a highly branched structure like a tree, and amylose has a linear structure. So these polysaccharides are poorly soluble in water because of the fact that you have a hydrogen bond between the hydroxyl group of the sugar. And here you have another representation of this sugar. And in fact, amylose forms an helix. And if you degrade amylose with an enzyme, you can obtain a cyclic oligosaccharide, which are called the cyclodextrin, which are famous, and which were highly studied as a CAG molecule to encapsulate a hydrophobic molecule. More than 20 years ago, they are still used for some application. And here you have amylopectin, which is, as I said, highly branched. So starch can be used as a thermoplastic polymer when it is mixed with glycerol, and so it can be extruded, and it is also used in food. So cellulose is the most abundant polysaccharide on the planet, and it is an important structural support in the plant cell wall, as it is found as a fiber. So this is cellulose and a macrofibril of cellulose, and here you have a microfibril of cellulose. And the glycosidic bond of this polysaccharide makes that cellulose adopt a rather linear structure. And because of the presence of many hydroxyl groups, you will have an important network of intramolecular and intermolecular hydrogen bonds, which means that this explains why you have fibers. And this explains why, when you put cellulose fibers in solution in water, they cannot dissolve at all. And so which means that, of course, cellulose is used for papers, but to valorize cellulose, it required chemical modification of cellulose. And so there were a lot of cellulose derivatives which are used in industry. And in this case, some hydroxyl group can be substituted with methyl group, ethyl, hydroxypropyl methyl, and also carboxymethyl. And in this case, you will obtain a polyelectrolyte. And in industry, so these polysaccharides have been developed a long time ago, and they are relatively cheap. And to synthesize this derivative in industry, it is relatively easy. You put the fiber of cellulose in a high concentrated solution of sodium hydroxide, and there will be nucleophilic attack of some reactant on a hydroxyl group. But when you do that, substitution will not be homogeneous at all, because reaction will occur only in the accessible region of the fiber, which means that all these derivatives have substituents which are not homogeneously distributed in the polymer chain, but it's not a problem. Because they have good properties for the targeting application. Nevertheless, I will show you that it can affect strongly the physico-chemical properties of polysaccharide. So, as I said, there are a lot of cellulose derivative which is used in a lot of applications in paint, pharmacy, cosmetic, food, etc. You have cellulose acetate, cellulose nitrate, ester and ether, and also in pharmacy and in food. And when you do this chemical modification, you pass from a non-water soluble polymer to a water soluble polymer. And if you highly substitute the hydroxyl group, you can also obtain cellulose which are soluble in organic solvent. And so carboxymethyl cellulose is widely used as a suspending agent, a thickener, an adhesive agent for many applications. And if you buy carboxymethyl cellulose, you must pay attention, because it can be found with it can be sold with different degree of substitution, which means that the number of carboxylic group on one sugar can be well controlled, which means that the polyelectrolyte behavior will strongly change depending on what we say the degree of substitution, the number of substituting group per sugar unit. So carboxymethyl cellulose is widely used in food, so everywhere, mainly as a stabilizing agent. So regarding heteropolysaccharide, So we can classify them in different families, chitin and chitosan, which are made of glucosamine, polyuronic acid, like alginate pectine, galactane, which contain galactose, hemicellulose, galactomannan, and glucomannan. So galactomannan are found in seeds, so they are cultivated in United States, and they are not expensive. One application, if, for example, you can form cationic guar, which is used in shampoo, because it interact with hair, for example. So this is also another way to classify polysaccharide. So polysaccharide can be found in plant. This is the case of pectine, galactomannan, glucomannan, from algae, alginate, carrageenan, and I will speak a little about this. Fucoidan and animal polysaccharide. So, as I said, chitosan, in fact, is not in animals, but is derived from chitin, which is found in crustaceous shells. And what I would say is that chitin has a structure similar to cellulose. The only difference is the fact that the OH in position 2 is replaced by N-acetylglucosamine, which means that chitin is a semi-crystalline polymer similar to cellulose. And we have hyaluronic acid, which until 2000 was extracted from rooster comb for biomedical application. But in 2000, some teams discovered the possibility to synthesize hyaluronic acid by bacterial fermentation. So, and now it is widely produced in this way for biomedical application. And you have also xanthan, other polysaccharide, which has a bacterial polysaccharide. So I will not comment the structure of this polysaccharide. So now I would like to speak a little about the properties of some polysaccharide to form hydrogel. So yesterday we discussed about the way to define a hydrogel, and EUPAC defined the gel as a non-fluid colloidal or a polymer network that is expanded through its whole volume by a fluid. So in polymer science, we define a hydrogel by a polymer network, which can be cross-linked by different ways, by chemical bond, covalent bond, by through physical interaction, which can be ionic interaction, hydrogen bond, hydrophobic interaction, or we have also a third family, which before was not really discussed, I would say. And this family is a family of dynamic covalent hydrogel, which means that in this case we have a covalent bond, but which is reversible, which means that the bond can break and reform. And these gel are slightly different properties than physical gel, and I will develop this in the third part. So in the case of physical hydrogel of polysaccharide, we have different types of polysaccharides. We can have ionic hydrogels, cross-linked by divalent cations, thermoreversible hydrogel, cross-linked by hydrogen bond, and thermo-associative hydrogels, which are cross-linked by through hydrophobic interaction. So first I will give an example of ionic hydrogels. This is the case of hydrogels based on alginates. So alginates are well-known polysaccharides. They are found in brown algae. And they are alginate are heteropolysaccharide, and I put S on alginates because depending on the season, the location, alginate can have different structure, which means that the ratio M divided by G, the chemical composition can vary. And also, the distribution of mannose and guluronic can also vary depending on the season and the location you isolate alginate. And so the molar mass of alginate is generally a few 100,000 grams per mole. And so this polysaccharide has peculiar properties due to the presence of guluronic acid, which is made of the sugar which have the conformation 1C4, which is relatively rare. And in this case, you can see that you have sugar in this conformation, and if you have two guluronic as neighbors, you can see that you have like a cage which can accommodate cation. And so it has been demonstrated that, or it is known that alginate is made of block, Mg block, M block, and J block. And the size of the block will strongly affect the properties of this polysaccharide in water, because these blocks have different stiffness. And the stiffer block is the J block. And of course, as also alginate is an ionic polysaccharide, it is a polyelectrolyte. And so we can say that alginate is a semi-rigid polysaccharide, and it is generally the case of all polyelectrolyte derived of natural polysaccharide, which means that these polysaccharides have an intrinsic persistent length, which means that they are rigid along a certain distance. And in the case of alginate, it has been demonstrated that the persistent ledge vary between 40 and 90 angstrom, depending on the size and of the different blocks. So if you have many and long J block, you will have a stiffer alginate derivative. And of course, the stiffness of polysaccharide will affect the dimension of the polysaccharide in a solution, in addition to salt concentration of pH, and of course, viscosity and thickening properties. Moreover, in fact, the J block has the ability to complex cation, certain cation, which are calcium, barium, and strontium, in a cooperative manner to form hydrogel like this. So here, if you have a block, a J block, you will have complexation with cation, like barium, strontium, calcium, and you will have long junction and hydrogel formation. And since you have long junction, you have hydrogel with strong elastic properties. Here you have an example of rheological behavior of an alginate hydrogel we analyzed in my lab a long time ago, where J prime is higher than J double prime and nearly independent of the frequency. When we modify this alginate by cyclodextrin, CAG molecule, we show that we have a decrease of the moduli, probably because of a steric problem to induce gelation, and also substitution of some guluronic acid. And so the mechanism of complexation of cation is due, of course, to the polyelectrolytic properties of alginate, but it is also due to cooperative interaction between the oxygen and calcium, which means that it is specific to this guluronic acid and also to the conformation of this polysaccharide. And of course, the stability and stiffness, yes? Yes, it's a good question. In fact, to prepare the lecture, I took a lot of time to find rheology about this, and I did not really find a recent paper. I just found this paper in which they analyzed strontium and calcium, but the gel was prepared in a special condition, and this was to show that they tested different alginate with different block of guluronic, and they showed that the modulus was higher when you have more guluronic acid. But barium is known that barium is more efficient to form a gel than calcium. So alginate, as I said, since it is a semi-rigid polymer which provide rapidly high viscosity at low concentration, it is used as a thickener, and it is also used as hydrogels in food, but also in biomedical and pharmaceutical field. It is used by dentists for taking dental impression, as beads to encapsulate drug, but also some cells, and especially because it's in this case using microfluidic, you can produce beads with a well-defined diameter when you mix a solution of alginate with a solution of calcium chloride, and it is also used as an hemostatic dressing. Because it can, the dressing of alginate can absorb exudates. Then I will move to thermoreversible hydrogels, which are cross-linked by hydrogen bonds. So the best example probably is the example of carrageenan. So carrageenan are found in red algae. And there are a lot of different types of carrageenan. And they belong to a family, the family of galactan. And in this family, there is also agarose that you probably know well, because agarose is used to cultivate bacteria. But contrary to agarose, which is a neutral polysaccharide, carrageenan is a polyelectrolyte. So carrageenan is made of two disaccharides. One is a galactose residue, and the other one is also a galactose. And some sugar can be sulfated. And in an empiric way, I would say, it is said that when we have an anhydro breach on the sugar, the probability to have a hydrogel is nearly 100%, which means that in the case of kappa carrageenan and iota carrageenan, we can have hydrogels in certain conditions, and I will explain. And in the case of lambda carrageenan, we have a thickening polymer. So why we have hydrogels? This is because of the specific properties of this polymer to display an helix call transition, which can be demonstrated by different characterization techniques, optical rotation, also conductimetry and differential scanning calorimetry. And the ability to carrageenan to form an helix will depend on the balance between electrostatic repulsion and attractive interaction due to hydrogen bonding. And so it means that if you, depending on the salt concentration and temperature, you will you will affect the transition of the helix coil transition. So here you have the optical rotation measurement of Karragenan in different aqueous solution containing NaCl or KCl. And you can see that when you increase the temperature, you have a transition from an helix to a coil. And you can see that this transition strongly depends on the salt. And this is due to the ability of Karragenan to the selectivity of potassium ion with Karragenan. If you use potassium, you will induce more easily the formation of an helix, which is due to the ionic selectivity of this polysaccharide. So a long time ago in my lab, before I was recruiting in my lab, a lot of characterization of Karragenan was done, especially by conductimetry. Here you are still the optical rotation and the concentration of the polymer. And so my colleague measured the activity coefficient of the counter ion of this polysaccharide as a function of concentration. And what we can see is that at 15 degrees Celsius and 35 degrees Celsius, in the presence of sodium, and at 35 degrees Celsius in the presence of sodium and potassium, you have an activity coefficient of 0.72. And if you use the Manning relationship, so the polyelectrolyte theory, which relates the activity coefficient to the charge parameter, you can calculate the charge parameter, which correspond to the fact that you have only a single chain with a precise distance between ionic group, because kappa Karragenan has a regular structure. You can see that at 15 degrees Celsius, in the presence of potassium, the activity coefficient is twice lower. And if you use this relationship, you can deduce that the charge parameter will be the double, and which is due to the fact that you have a double helix. The two Karragenan form assemble together to form a double, which means that the charge parameter will be the double. So by combining polyelectrolyte theory and measurement of the activity coefficient, you can have an idea of the conformation of the polysaccharide, which is also confirmed by optical rotation. And also, it can also be confirmed by analysis by size exclusion chromatography, because if you analyze the molar mass of a single chain or a double chain, you can also deduce this. And so, what is the mechanism of gelation of kappa Karragenan? In fact, at high temperature and in diluted solution, you have coil. And when you will cool, decrease the temperature, increase the concentration, and if you use potassium, you will induce dimer of helix. And if you increase more concentration, you will have aggregation of helix due to the formation of due to hydrogen bond interaction. And at higher concentration, it will form a network. So this is the phase diagram of kappa Karragenan using potassium as counter ion. And you can see that if you are in diluted solution, you have the coil helix transition without hysteresis. But when you increase concentration, you have a gel. Yes? This is because there is ionic selectivity, which means that potassium selectively interact with the sugar, which is not the case of sodium, and it favors helix. So it is very specific to this Karragenan. Generally, it does not happen with other polysaccharide, typically with CMC, we don't see such a selective ionic selectivity. So this hysteresis at high concentration of polymer is due to the fact that as you have aggregates of helix, you need to have time to destroy this aggregate, and which is the reason why you have this hysteresis. Yes. To my knowledge, I only know sodium and potassium. But well, perhaps strontium, but I'm not sure. Then I will move to the last example of hydrogel of natural polysaccharide, but it's not perfectly natural because in fact it is based of methyl cellulose. So I already explained what is methyl cellulose. So it is modified cellulose, and as I said, this modification is formed in heterogeneous condition, which means that along the polymer chain, you can have sugar without substituent, sugar with one methyl group, and sugar with 3 methyl group. But that, as I said, in the case of the commercial cellulose, because accessibility of sugar is not easy, there will be some area where there will be a lot of methyl group, and in some area where you will have no substituting group. And in my lab a long time ago, the project was to synthesize methyl cellulose in homogeneous condition, using at this time the only solvent which were able to solubilize cellulose, which was dimethylacetamine in the presence of lithium chloride, which is known to destroy hydrogen bond. And they wanted to compare the gelation properties of cellulose, methyl cellulose synthesized in homogeneous condition with methyl cellulose synthesized in heterogeneous condition. And to rationalize the properties, they analyze the distribution of substituting group per sugar, and to this they hydrolyze the polysaccharide in a monosaccharide, and then they analyze each sugar to know the number of substituting, the percentage of sugar which contain 3 methyl group, D-methyl group, or 1 methyl groups. And you can see that for the same degree of substitution, I remind you that the degree of substitution is the number of substituting group per sugar unit. You can see that in the case of the commercial sample, you have more sugar which contain more methyl group compared to the cellulose derivative synthesized in homogeneous condition. So if you analyze cellulose by dynamic rheology as a function of temperature at a fixed frequency, you can see that the modulus J prime will increase as a function of temperature, which is due to the gelation properties of methyl cellulose. And it is this gelation occurs in 2 steps. And above 60 degrees, there is generally turbid hydrogels. And so again, there is hysteresis, like this, a strong hysteresis. So what happened in the case of the methyl cellulose synthesized in homogeneous condition with the same degree of substitution compared to the commercial samples? Unfortunately, it was the formation of hydrogel could not be observed. And it is due to the fact that the architecture of the polymer was different. In the case of the industrial derivative, since you have sugar which are highly methylated, you promote formation of junction. But in the case of the cellulose derivative, which were synthesized in more homogeneous condition, it is the formation of high junction is not promoted, and so you have only a very weak hydrogel which can only appear at very high temperature. So a lot of studies were done on these hydrogels to understand the structure at molecular scale, to understand why we have a two-step like this. And it was hypothesized that in the first step you have a hydrophobic interaction. Yes? Mm, mm. Yeah. Yes. 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 In fact, I was rapid, but I explained a little. When you modify cellulose and you introduce substituting group, you destroy totally the network of hydrogen bond. And this is why, in fact, you decrease a lot hydrogen bond. And you replace, this is due to the presence of this substituent. You know, at the beginning, you have a very stereoregular polymer, which can form a strong network of hydrogen bond. And if you introduce substituents, you totally destroy and impair possibility to form hydrogen bond. And it is known that when you introduce small hydrophobic group, methyl is very small, but it's slightly hydrophobic, and you will promote mainly hydrophobic interaction. And it is also the case of synthetic polymer. They are known to form many synthetic polymer like polynipem. I don't know if you heard about this. They are water soluble, but when you heat, they form, they precipitate due to hydrophobic interaction. And sometimes it is said that methyl cellulose is like such a polymer. It has a low critical solution temperature. But in this case, the interaction which dominate are hydrophobic interaction. And this is like this. So it is demonstrated that even at low concentration, at low temperature, we have already hydrophobic interaction. And so then the formation of strong hydrogel is due to formation of fiber of cellulose, the cellulose derivative, which was demonstrated by cryo team and also scattering experiment. So then I will finish the part with glycosaminoglycan and hydrogels we developed using chemistry. And I will, so for this, focus on hyaluronic acid, which belong to the family of glycosaminoglycan. So glycosaminoglycan are linear polysaccharides, which are found in animal tissue and, of course, in our body. And the repeating unit of this sugar, of this polysaccharide, is generally made of two different sugars, an hexamine, so a sugar with an amine, and a sugar which can be an uronic derivative or a neutral sugar. So this, most of these polysaccharides are linked to protein, which are anchored in the cell membrane. And this oligosaccharide participate to the cell communication, to the communication between cells. And the only polysaccharide which is not anchored into a membrane and linked to a protein is the hyaluronic acid. And hyaluronic acid is also the only glycosaminoglycan which is not sulfated. since the other glycosaminoglycan contain a sulfate group. So their molar mass range for 5 to 5,000 kilograms per mole. And this is because, first, it depends on their role, but also this polysaccharide can be degraded by enzymes in the body. So generally, we have about 10 grams of hyaluronic acid in the body, which is consistently renewed by enzyme and degraded mainly in the liver. So here you have, so this glycosaminoglycan are the main component of the extracellular matrix of tissue. This is an illustration of the extracellular matrix. Here you have hyaluronic acid, which has a very high molar mass, on which you have other sulfated glycosaminoglycan, which are linked to this. And this glycosaminoglycan form a highly hydrated network, which is reinforced, I would say, by a fiber of collagen. And so it means that you have a three-dimensional network of which the mechanical properties will be reinforced by collagen, and hydration will be provided by glycosaminoglycan and hyaluronic acid. So why this sulfate group? Because they interact a lot of water, and also they can complex protein by electrostatic interaction, growth factor, which participate to the development of cells, their migration, and etc. So hyaluronic acid was discovered in 1934 in the vitreous body of eyes. And in fact, it is ubiquitous in the body. We have high hyaluronic acid in the synovial fluid, and I will come back to this, and also in the skin. And the reason for this motivated a lot of development about chemical modification of hyaluronic acid, especially for the treatment of osteoarthritis and also for the treatment of wrinkles. And what I can say also, so of course it is hyaluronic acid is biocompatible and biodegradable. And this polysaccharide, at the beginning, it was considered just as a structural support of the extracellular matrix, but with time it was discovered that hyaluronic acid has very important biological role, especially because it can be recognized by cell membrane receptors, such as CT44, the receptor CT44, but also RAM, which is expressed by many mammalian cells, cancer cells, and this receptor has specific role. They play a role in cell migration or proliferation, and it is a very complex things, and today we are not totally able to understand what's happening, especially also because properties of hyaluronic acid depend on its molar mass. So the first, I will come back to this, but the first application of hyaluronic acid in the biomedical field started in the 70s. And now, as I said, it can be produced by bacterial fermentation, which has the advantage to the fact that to produce hyaluronic acid with a well-defined molar mass from 5,000 to 3 million. And it means that we can have well-defined samples of hyaluronic acid with well-defined molar mass and with pharmaceutical grade. So here you have example of application of hyaluronic acid. So it is used for the treatment of osteoarthritis, the treatment of wrinkle, which represent a big market, and also it is used, I would say, as a pillow to protect eye during ophthalmic surgery. So depending on the manufacturer and application, hyaluronic acid is used either in a crosslink, as a crosslink polymer or as a linear polymer, especially because now we can obtain hyaluronic acid with different molar mass. So as I said, this is a very simplistic, I would say, and I think representation of possible way of biological impact of the molar mass of the biological properties of hyaluronic acid. So hyaluronic acid can interact with cells like this. So if it has high molar mass, and in this case it regulates cellular interaction, but also it can, when it is in the form of an oligomer, it can trigger certain biological reactions. And so this, the way how hyaluronic acid function is still under debate. So we have in the body different receptors of hyaluronic acid. So on the liver, on the spleen, on the kidney. And according to me, I believe that when hyaluronic acid has finished to play its role, it is degraded by enzymes. And since on the liver you have receptor of hyaluronic acid, it is the oligomer of hyaluronic acid are internalized and degraded. And there is a certain turnover of hyaluronic acid. So this polymer, it has been demonstrated that in the solid state it adopts an helix conformation, which is highly extended. But in water, we don't really know how is the conformation. Nobody succeeded to demonstrate the existence of hydrogen bond in water because it's quite difficult to do that experimentally. So hyaluronic acid, as it is a disaccharide. It's made of a disaccharide repeating unit with a carboxylic acid group. It is a polyelectrolyte with a very regular structure. And here, which means that as a polyelectrolyte, it has an intrinsic pKa. So this is the typical behavior of a polyelectrolyte, the variation of pKa as a function of degree of neutralization. And so to have the intrinsic pKa, you need to extrapolate, and you will have an intrinsic pKa of around 3, which is typical of polycarboxylic acid. So in my lab a long time ago, when hyaluronic acid was analyzed by SAS exclusion chromatography with multi-detection, it was possible to correlate the intrinsic viscosity with the molar mass of hyaluronic acid. And it was, in this case, possible to determine the Markovinck parameter, which relate the intrinsic viscosity, which reflects the hydrodynamic volume, with the molar mass, which is quite useful because it indicates dimension of hyaluronic acid, and the intrinsic viscosity is also useful to have an idea of the critical overlap concentration, because sometimes it is said that the product of the reverse of the overlap concentration with the concentration, if it is equal to 1, it is nearly equal to 1, which can allow to assess the critical overlap concentration, and I think it is a good approximation. So next, to finish rapidly in 10 minutes, I would like to speak about an example of hyaluronic acid in viscose supplementation. This was a topic, a motivation of my research project was when I was recruited in my lab a long time ago. Because in 2000, it was the beginning of production of hyaluronic acid by bacterial fermentation. And at this time, the market in terms of viscose supplementation became very high. And so this, what means viscose supplementation? It consists in intra-articular injection of hyaluronic acid to replace lost hyaluronic acid, since hyaluronic acid is the main component of the synovial fluid, and it is responsible of the viscoelastic properties of the synovial fluid. But in the osteoarthritic knee, it has been demonstrated that the viscoelastic, the synovial fluid is only viscous because of the reduction of the molar mass and the concentration of hyaluronic acid. So it was hypothesized that if we inject hyaluronic acid with high molar mass in the synovial fluid, we could recover the viscoelastic properties of hyaluronic acid. The first experiment was done on horses in the 70s, and it was demonstrated that it worked efficiently. And so this stimulated the development of viscosupplement. But rapidly it was discovered that since hyaluronic acid can be degraded by enzyme in the body, the lifetime of this hyaluronic acid was very low. And this stimulated the development of cross-linked hyaluronic acid. So this is the main two chemical cross-linking method used by industry to cross-link hyaluronic acid. So the first method is to use a D-epoxide, which is highly toxic. But of course, after opening, it is not toxic. So this method is used to cross-link hyaluronic acid for aesthetic medicine. And this is hyaluronic acid can be also cross-linked by divinyl sulfone. And this method was first developed to produce the first viscosupplement. But since we are in this case, we have chemical hydrogels, and we want to inject these hydrogels, there was certain difficulties. And in the case of viscosupplementation, the strategy was to mix a slightly cross-linked hyaluronic acid with also high molar mass hyaluronic acid to find a trade-off between injectability and viscoelastic properties. So the first cross-linked derivative of hyaluronic acid, which was used in viscosupplementation, is named Synvisc, which is still, I would say, one of the best products on the market. And Synvisc is a cross-link from hyaluronic acid from rooster comb. So it was initially developed by another company, but which was then bought by Sanofi. So when I was recruited in my lab, it was the challenge was to develop cross-linking method of hyaluronic acid to produce injectable hydrogel. So here you have the rheological behavior of hyaluronic acid, which is of Synvisc, which is highly elastic in comparison to the solution of hyaluronic acid, linear hyaluronic acid, which is viscous. So my first strategy was to develop physical hydrogels. And the goal was to induce gelation by hydrophobic interaction. So even if hyaluronic acid possessed many functional groups, which allow selective modification, it was not so easy to modify this polysaccharide because problem of reactivity of some group. But finally, I succeeded to introduce alkyl chains selectively on the carboxylic group on hyaluronic acid. And I grafted a chain with different degree of substitution because it was impossible to predict what would happen. So I grafted alkyl chain with different lengths. And I observed that with C10 chain, I could obtain a transparent soft hydrogel. Here you have the initial solution of hyaluronic acid, and here you have the hydrogel. So perhaps I see that the time is going rapidly. So The second method we developed more recently was to develop dynamic covalent hydrogel. And in this case, we use boronate ester bond. So dynamic covalent hydrogels are emerged as very interesting hydrogels in the biomedical field because they can be extruded under application of shear and rapidly recover their gel state when the shear is stopped because of the dynamic nature of the bond. And here you have a list of certain bonds, and depending on the lifetime of this bond, you can control the viscoelastic properties of this hydrogel. And since this bond break and reform, it allows cells to remodel the matrix and also cells to migrate. And so several groups previously used boronate ester bond, which involves the reaction of a boronic acid derivative with a diol to produce dynamic covalent hydrogels, but this work were done on synthetic polymer, and such a gel were only obtained in alkaline condition. And of course, the nature of boronic acid and the sugar will strongly affect the properties of the hydrogels in terms of rheological properties. So in my lab, we discovered that when we use this boronic acid derivative with hyaluronic acid, we could obtain hydrogel at physiological pH. And to get a better understanding on the viscoelastic properties of these hydrogels, we vary the structure of the boronic acid, but also the sugar, because it was been demonstrated that the viscoelastic properties of this hydrogel and also the stiffness, depending on the affinity constant between the small molecular crosslinker and also the exchange rate between the two molecules grafted on the polysaccharide. So I will finish like this. So we synthesize different hydrogels. We analyze, we determine the affinity constant and also exchange rate of this polysaccharide. And we demonstrated that depending on the nature of boronic acid and the diol, the sugar, we could obtain either viscoelastic hydrogels or strongly elastic hydrogels, which was due to the structure of the small molecular crosslinker. And we found that in certain cases, we have tricovalent bond between the two polymer chains, which resulted in a bond with a strong lifetime, while in certain conditions we have bicyclic structure, which are not stable, and which, for this reason, there is cleavage to form this molecule, but since this molecule contains also a strain cycle, introduced a rapid equilibrium between the bond and unbound state, which resulted macroscopically to a viscoelastic system. So, which means that by choosing specifically the sugar and also the boronic acid derivative, we could tune the viscoelastic properties of these hydrogels. So I don't have time to finish this, but this hydrogel was then injected in the brain of rat and also in the joint of mice who suffer from osteoarthritis. And then we image the gel in the knee of osteoarthritis of mice to rationalize, to correlate the therapeutic effect with the lifetime of the hydrogels, the volume of the hydrogels, to answer important questions in the field of biomedical field, because even if viscose supplementation has been developed for more than 14 years old, is still under the efficacy of this treatment is still under of debate, because there are a lot of chemical products on the market with different efficacy, different dosage regimens, which make understanding impossible. And for this reason, it is now important to understand the in vivo behavior of these hydrogels by using imaging technique, and this is why we did recently. So I'm going to finish. And so to conclude, I hope that you now understood why we have so many types of polysaccharide, and why it is important to understand the chemical structure of polysaccharide, because it affects the conformation of polysaccharide and also their physicochemical properties, which strongly depend on pH, salt, and sometimes temperature when we have polyelectrolyte. And these polysaccharides are important polymer with unique properties compared to synthetic polymer. And this is financial support of our work, and I would like to thank you for your attention, and I can answer your question.